Good morning. My name is Tomea Sippio-Smith. I'm the Education Policy Director at Public Citizens for Children and Youth, PCCY, a child advocacy organization that creates and supports effective, good policy for children. We work with the PA Schools Work Campaign, a group of education stakeholders that fight for equitable and adequate funding for PA's public schools. Thank you, Bensalem and Dr. Lee, for hosting this event. Today, 25 superintendents and school leaders across the state are holding press conferences in the Lancaster-York area, Pittsburgh area, Allentown, Scranton, North Central PA, and here in Bensalem to call on the legislature to increase state funding to cover the rising costs of education. We've all seen and experienced how vital schools and education have been for our students during this pandemic. What you may not know is that last year, state funding for basic education and special education was flat. Districts received what they had the year before, but the state and federal mandated costs like charter schools, pensions, and special education expenses, Pennsylvania schools must continue to pay, and they have kept rising. According to estimates from the Pennsylvania Association of School Business Officials, PASBO, for the 2021-20 school year alone, this amounts to about $665 million, and the districts will be facing approximately $485 million in additional increases next year. This is unsustainable, and ultimately, those who feel the burden most are our students, especially those who live in districts that cannot make up the shortfalls. Governor Wolf has proposed a bold plan to infuse state fundings into our schools, a $1.5 billion plan that offsets these rising costs and brings more to school districts, giving them what they need for our students. Schools cannot do this work without adequate resources. The state legislature must join the governor in his boldness, step up now, and do more to fund our schools. This morning, I'm joined by some of the region's phenomenal school leaders who've led their schools and educated their students in a year like no other. They now face the remarkable task of getting our students back on track and creating unimagined pathways to support their learning and success. They are here to share the impact education funding has had on our schools in our districts. Thank you again for hosting. I now turn the program over to Dr. Lee.
Thank you, Tomea, and welcome everybody to Bensalem Township School District. Regards and gratitude to our host, Bensalem High School Principal Bill Ferreira. Thank you, Bill, for your hospitality. I also would like to recognize and acknowledge two of our Board of School Director members, Rachel Fingles and Heather Odie Snyder. Thank you not only for your attendance, but for your hard work and your support during an incredibly challenging year. Thank you. We're fortunate to have some of our most profound, pronounced, and favored partners here. Dr. Mark Hoffman, Executive Director of Bucks County Intermediate Unit. Thank you, Mark, for being here, and thank you for your support. And our colleagues in career technical education, they are part of this conversation, never to be forgotten. They provide great opportunities for not only Bensalem's kids, but the other 5 sending districts in Lower Bucks County. Representing Bucks County Technical High School is Executive Director Dr. Leon Paskey. Thank you for being here. And of course, you'll meet and learn more about them and their situations later. My colleagues from Morrisville, Jason Harris, who is also a Bensalem resident. Dr. Dana Bedden from Centennial, just up Street Road about 10 miles. Right? So welcome to Bensalem. And our neighbors to the southwest, represented by Board of School Director member Mallory Fix-Lopez. Welcome to Bensalem. Thank you. And of course, Colleen Bell, Valley Elementary, Snyder Middle School, and Bensalem High School parent, is going to be with us to speak to school funding as it relates to not just her kids, but the other 6,500 here in Bensalem Township School District. So welcome to Bensalem. Thank you all for being here. And also representing Bristol Borough, Principal Nick Nastasi. Nick, welcome. And a few of my colleagues, in addition to Bill Ferreira, Dr. Victoria Velasquez, Mr. Brian Cohen, our technical crew, thank you for the setup and your oversight and connection. Our building and grounds crew, and certainly our public liaison representative, Susan Fye, who coordinated this in collaboration with our partners and colleagues at PA Schools Work, PASA, PASBO, PCCY. So thank you all for your efforts in coordinating, presenting this crucial event. Here in Bensalem, we've been underfunded by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for millions of dollars over the last decade. That shortfall is through no fault of anybody here in the Bensalem Township School District. Thank you. Yeah, as a matter of fact, since Act 1 was enacted in 2007, our district has enacted maximum or near maximum Act 1 taxing efforts just to keep the options and opportunities available and accessible for our Bensalem kids. They are to be commended. It's a brave and right position, and it keeps things moving here in Bensalem. The things that we can control, financially and economically, we control. 40% of our operating budget is allocated to charter school costs, PCERS, pension, and special ed. And we're very, very proud of the care provided to our special learners. But the costs have tripled over the last 20 years. Again, lack of funding from outside sources. IDEA in the 70s promised a 40% reimbursement rate. We've not come close to that. So if you back those costs out of our operating budget, special ed, PCERS, and charter school costs, we've increased our spending less than an average of 1% over the last 10 budget years. Kudos to our board for the financial stewardship. It's outstanding. It's outstanding. And we haven't deprived or denied our kids what they need to advance in this 21st century, 22nd century, not far away from us in the grand scheme of things. And we've provided absolutely what they deserve, what this community expects, and what they deserve. So thank you all for your maintenance of effort, and Bensalem for your investment in our kids. We're proud of the care we provide for our children here in Bensalem, the opportunities, attainment, achievement, and advancement related to all of those things. A lot more work to be done. We're eyeball deep in budget development right now. While we are grateful for the additional federal assistance through CARES, Heroes, and American Rescue Plan, it's not going to be enough to plug the holes and gaps. Public education, not just in Bensalem, but across our Commonwealth and country, are critical. In fact, it is the most significant economic engine available for the American people. Hands down, not even close to any other initiative, plan, opportunity, or advantage any of us can provide. This is it. This is the backbone and the future of our country, and it needs to be appropriately and properly funded. Thank you for your attendance, and in the case of some of my colleagues' participation, it's my pleasure now to introduce a friend and colleague and neighbor, Mr. Jason Harris, Morrisville School District Superintendent.
Formally, I would say thanks, Dr. Lee, but I say thanks, Sam, because Sam is indeed a friend and colleague. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Harris, and it's my distinct privilege and honor to serve as the superintendent of schools for the school district borough of Morrisville. Prior to serving that capacity, I was the district's business manager, and prior to that, I served as an elected school board member here in Bensalem. I also have been a school administrator in the state of New Jersey, as well as a teacher. And fun fact, I'm a proud class of '91 graduate from Bensalem High School, and I performed many concerts and musicals in the very building in which we're assembled. For additional context, I have 3 children who have participated in the schools, 2 have graduated, and 1 who currently attends middle school. I serve a small district with a very supportive board, engaged parents, and a student body and staff who have a lot of heart. Funding in our district is always a challenge, and what brings me here today is to tell part of the story of how adequate school funding could be the difference between success and failure for the Morrisville Bulldogs. Each school district has a slightly different story and focus on how state funding impacts its daily operations. Most districts in both large and small share a similar struggle and make hard choices each year. However, from a small district's perspective like Morrisville, we face annually the possibility of furloughing staff and cutting programs because there is not enough funding to meet the constantly rising costs of special education, charter schools, and pensions. The specter of the staff furlough resolution always visits in March and April and has appeared many times in recent history, causing many of our staff to worry about their jobs and many parents to worry about the programs that we can offer. Cuts from basic programs such as music, art, library, physical education, after-school athletics, and kindergarten have been some of the programs that have been considered under our previous furlough resolutions. Simply put, our tiny district is not able to tax its way out of the skyrocketing cost of these underfunded mandates, and this creates an uncertainty which is not healthy for the students or staff or its community. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the critical role that our schools play in our communities, while delivering a 1-2 punch to Pennsylvania schools which are already suffering from years of underfunding. A drop in local revenues during the COVID-driven economic slowdown and a spike in costs to educate students to keep them safe during this unprecedented crisis has yielded a significant financial challenge for districts across the Commonwealth. There is a one-time influx of federal funds, but they will not solve Morrisville's funding problems. Under the American Rescue Plan, we will receive approximately $1.7 million. That does seem like a large amount. However, it's not enough to provide the needed supports and services for special education students within our walls, nor is it sustainable to provide the needed technology to refresh in future years that have been brought on by the pandemic. In a small district, we wear many hats and have many job descriptions that should be divided up into 2 or 3 people. However, what a one-time funding source cannot do is provide sustainable sources of revenue to support the necessary personnel to meet the challenges of the volatile, uncertain, often chaotic, and very ambiguous environments that have been created and exacerbated by the pandemic. Mandated costs like pensions, special education, and charter school tuition have increased for far more than the state has been willing to cover over the last few decades. Over the past 5 years, mandates of pension costs have risen more than $1 million for Morrisville. To give context, an average Act 1 tax levy has been approximately $300,000 in revenue. Charter school costs have increased more than 50% in that same time. couple that with a $750,000 increase in mandated special education costs, and you can see how very quickly our local district's ability to tax its way out of those issues does not meet the financial needs that are required by state and federal law. As a matter of metaphor, as a complete aside, I feel like the wind that we're currently enduring feels like my budget season. Additionally, I would like to point out that the one-time money from the federal stimulus program has been trickling to our districts. Of the $2.7 million that has been allocated through the 3 stimulus programs, only $139,000 has been received to date. I'll say that again. Of the $2.7 million that Morrisville is expected to receive, we've only yielded cash payments of $139,000 to date. This slow roll of funds leads to many cash flow challenges, such as the inability to purchase enough Chromebooks for a one-to-one initiative, or to make timely payments on our curricular supplies, books, and equipment, which are required to be purchased in advance and then reimbursed by the Commonwealth in a pro-rated monthly payment. As one-time funding can certainly provide the needed bolus of hope to grow our district's technology offerings, over the long term, we know that these devices will become obsolete over a few years. Providing sustainable funding for the purchase of technology and equipment that can provide the requisite 21st century skills that are necessary for our students to compete in school and in life is incumbent upon the Commonwealth to consider as they make the allocations for our district. These issues force districts to rely too heavily on local tax revenue. Both as an employee and elected school board member, I've had to wrestle with the decision to recommend a tax increase on the communities I've served. That is not a fun enterprise. This is why we are calling upon the state to increase basic education funding and special education funding, as well as career and technical education, to keep pace with the inflationary effects that those recurring costs have on our budget. I appreciate you listening, and I thank you for coming today. And at this time, I would like to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Dana Bedden, Centennial School District.
I am not Dr. Bedden, although I wish I had a suit. I just wanted to interrupt the flow to acknowledge the pride of Bensalem High School. Our Marine JROTC cadets who welcome you here and stay with us for the duration of the ceremony. This is a phenomenal program we're proud to offer. It's been a staple here in Bensalem Township for decades, and its members and cadets often go on to serve our country. So we're proud and honored to have them with us, as we always are. And I have to say, when they're with us, I feel safe. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
To the ROTC cadets, I would say good morning to you. I'm a proud graduate of the ROTC program at the University of Florida. I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to come out this morning and join you for this awesome occasion. I'd like to ask that you keep this key point in mind. The budget process is not just a collection of numbers, but an expression of our values. I've had the pleasure to serve as an administrator or superintendent in 6 school districts across Pennsylvania. York City School District, Exeter Township School District, the City of Philadelphia, William Penn, Warriortown, and now Centennial School District just up the road. These districts and their levels of wealth and student demographics cannot be more different. Each has a unique challenge, and clearly money matters. Students living in well-funded districts have access to resources that students in poorly funded districts do not. Yet all the pressing issues the state can no longer afford to continue to ignore. Today, I will focus just on 2 of them. Inequalities perpetuated by using the outdated system of property taxes to fund our educational system, and unfunded mandates and mandated cost increases. When you think about the inequalities created by the funding of schools using property values and the burden it puts on our local revenues, despite the increases in our basic education funding over the past few years, local school district residents pay a larger share of the cost in property taxes to fund our school districts. And quite often, that amounts to about 80% in the southeastern portion of the Commonwealth. Why? Because the state is not paying its fair share. Using property taxes to fund education is an inherently unequal process. It ensures that our students' quality of resources and overall education in the Commonwealth is determined by the zip code that they live in rather than their individual abilities. One analysis showed that a large portion of the school districts in the southeast portion contributes about 80% of the cost. That's 80% of the cost put upon the local residents. This system ensures that unfunded school districts remain underfunded. The rising charter costs, special ed costs, and pension costs continue to eat away at the ability of local taxpayers to cover the costs using an inherently unequal system of property taxes. Without adequate and equitable state funding, this foundation will continue to crumble, and it is crumbling. The state's failure to pay its fair share is not only hurting underfunded districts, but all school districts. When you think about unfunded and mandated cost increase, look at, for Centennial, the period of 2010 to 2019. When you think about charter schools, the charter school tuition has increased 237.6% from 2010 to 2019 in Centennial. Our tuition cost is growing faster than our enrollment growth. From 2009 to 2019, the CSD charter enrollment grew 7.9%, but the tuition cost grew a whopping 37.6%. That's a 29.7% difference. Our special ed costs from the period of 2011 to 2021, special ed expenditures have gone from $13.5 million in 2011 to $22.6 million in 2021, an increase of roughly $9.1 million, or 67.5% increase. Our funding for special education costs has gone from $3 million in 2011 to a whopping $3.1 million in 2021 rounded. The true increase is only about $165,000, or 5.6% of funding made available for the district to support special education. And as we look at PCCY, the cost from 2011 to 2021, the district's pension expenses, the expenses for the state, the districts grew 665% over the 10-year period from 2009 to 2019. But for CSD, our expenses even grew more, a whopping 673.1% over the same period of time. Again, I remind you that the budget is not a collection of numbers, but an expression of our values. The governor proposed a bold budget to move all Pennsylvania students forward. It may not be enough, but it's a bold move to go forward. We urge the legislator to be bold as well. Increase state basic education funding to cover the rising mandated costs for the school year and the next increase in special education funded by $200 million more to support our most vulnerable students. We also ask that you pump the $10 million into the budget for career and technical education. The budget, again, is not a collection of numbers, but an expression of our values. An investment in education is an investment in the quality of life associated with healthcare, crime reduction, etc. It builds strong communities. Education is workforce development. Education helps maintain property values. Education is economic development. And most importantly, the future of the region and the Commonwealth and America is dependent upon quality education. I ask you this reflective question. If you believe education is expensive, think about the cost of ignorance. If you think education is expensive, think about the cost of ignorance. I thank you for this opportunity, and I have the great pleasure of introducing Mallory Fix-Lopez from the School District of Philadelphia Board of Education. Thank you.
you. Good morning. It's great to be here in Bensalem with fellow education leaders talking about a critical issue, the need for additional recurring state investments in K-12 education. And Superintendent Lee and Principal Ferrara, thank you for hosting us. And to the leaders of PA School Works, thank you for your advocacy and for bringing us together to highlight the need for new state education investments. For the School District of Philadelphia, the COVID-19 pandemic has severely impacted our financial position. Last year, we ended the year with a positive fund balance of more than $175 million. Due to flat funding at the state level, declining local revenue, increase in mandated costs of more than $100 million, and new expenses to keep students and staff healthy, safe, and learning throughout the pandemic, our financial position has shifted from a place of stability to a looming financial crisis. Earlier this year, we were facing a deficit in excess of $250 million for the next school year, a deficit that would have rivaled the one the district faced following the Great Recession. Fortunately, federal relief funding will buy us time, allowing us to shore up our budget over the next 3 years while making investments in our students and buildings. But this one-time federal support is not a replacement for new, recurring investments from the state. Our structural issues still exist. The only way to avoid the financial cliff is for the state to continue investing in education. So I'm here today to add Philadelphia's name to the list of school districts and advocacy organizations calling on Governor Wolf and the General Assembly to pass a budget that includes new funding for basic education that will, at a minimum, cover our mandated cost increases, new funding for special education, and new funding for career and technical education. Let's not repeat history. Pass a budget that invests in our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Colleen Bell, a parent of Valley Elementary School Home and School President.
Good morning. My name is Colleen Bell. I'm the proud parent of 3 daughters. My oldest attends Bensalem High School. I have one at Snyder Middle School, and my youngest daughter attends Valley Elementary School. I'm also PTO president at Valley Elementary School and a Sports Association secretary here at Bensalem High School. I'm a longtime resident of Bensalem, and I look forward to when we can return to normal after 16 months of this pandemic. Although our students have had in-person instruction for much of this year, it is far from normal. Our district and community have engaged in numerous adjustments to ensure safety, health, and as much educational continuity as possible. This has also come at a financial cost. We are grateful for additional federal assistance, but the downturn in the COVID economy could compromise district revenues in the future. We urge the General Assembly and the Governor to minimally maintain current school funding efforts in the interest of advancing not just Bensalem School District's mission, but economic vitality and citizenship through all public schools. I'm deeply concerned as a parent and community member that less support from the Commonwealth would add significantly to the challenges our community and students have endured for the last 16 months. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of our community school district.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If there are members of the press, then I will open it up for any questions that you may have. If there are no questions, then I thank you all for coming today. And we want to reiterate the importance of the state investing in our education. You've heard from school districts across the area about the importance of having adequate state funding, and that what we receive from the federal government is not nearly enough to fill in the gaps that are long-standing and have existed. We are calling on the state to invest its fair share and invest in our students. Thank you so much for joining today.